Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff operations officer, assisted the national security team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the vice commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
Listen to what Kentucky Democrat Governor Andy Beshear had to say about Kamala Harris's price-fixing proposal.
This isn't about trying to price fix. It's just making sure that the economy is operating the way it should, that this is really supply and demand, which we all respect. It's just making sure that coming out of the pandemic or in difficult times that people aren't increasing the price of food just to make a bigger profit. All it is making sure that capitalism stays within the guardrails, and it's not new. We've been doing this in the States for a long time.
Kevin O'Leary joins me now. I got a feeling, Kevin, that you really don't agree with that, do you?
No, I don't. And I have to look at it through the lens of an investor. I have to invest regardless of who's in the White House. So I really perk my ears up, Stuart, when I hear policy, as I did at a rally this weekend. I've spoken with dozens of investors, and we're quite shocked. Just from the 30,000 feet, we thought Harris was going to reboot her whole position to the middle. The idea was to get the swing voters on board with her with a middle strategy. Instead, we're getting Bidenomics 2.0, which is a shock. In addition to Bidenomics 2.0, if you look through the rally proposals, it's basically the same stuff they've been touting for the last 36 months. You've got this price control, price fixing patina on top of it, which we know doesn't work. You go back to the 70s when we tried this in the U.S., it was a disaster. Look at Venezuela today, or North Korea, or the old USSR tried this. It leads to black markets. It leads to a complete loss of freedom of goods and a breakdown of distribution. I mean, this is a really, really bad idea. And I'm so shocked that she's doing it. We're all shocked. We can't believe this is the platform. We're almost stunned, because this leads to a position of just saying, well, you're getting the same thing you had. And Bidenomics as a brand is toxic waste to the swing voter. It's associated with inflation. All of these ideas are very inflationary.
Kamala's Dangerous Economic Plan. Welcome to Training Tuesday, and the Rob Maness Show is live on Worldview Tube and our X Spaces simulcast. Well, failed communist economic policies are being embraced once again in America by the Democrat Party. Politicians on both sides of the aisle have tried price controls and failed dramatically. Nixon tried it, so did Carter, both with disastrous results. I remember the gas lines of the 1970s. And they were caused directly by these policies. Well, Vice President Kamala Harris's proposal on a federal ban on corporate price gouging in the food and grocery industries, which would be the first of its kind. She's also planning on trying to destroy the housing market, which is in such bad shape today that generations of young Americans don't feel they'll ever be able to own their own home. Folks, homeownership is the economic engine that created our middle class, and now we're destroying the very thing that made us a superpower. Of course, the communists in the Harris camp talking constantly about Donald Trump's economic plans that they say only help the rich, even though Trump's record proves them otherwise. Well, my guest today to discuss this mess is my friend Bart Marquis. He's the former Principal Assistant Deputy Secretary of Energy for International Affairs and an author and a Foreign Service Officer. Bart, welcome back to the Rob Maness Show.
Hi, Rob. It's nice to be back with you.
Yeah, it's good to see you, my friend. I guess O'Leary was like, we're shocked. I got to ask you the first question of the show and let you take a little rant on this, but why would he be shocked? Why is anybody even surprised by this? I'm not surprised.
I'm not shocked. I think the most you're gonna be mad at me for saying this, Rob. I think the most relevant piece of information about this, when you look at Andy Bashir talking and praising this and pretending this is a good policy, you know what it makes me think of? It makes me think of that big old van outside the Democrat National Convention headquarters offering free vasectomies to all the Democrat guys there who still need them. I think it's a requirement for advancement within the Democrat Party. You've got to give it up if you're going to be an official, because at some point you're going to be asked to go out there and lie with a straight face to all the American people in front of God and your mother and everybody and say, oh, this is a good plan. I can't think of a worse possible plan. There's my rant. Is that ranty enough? I can rant forever.
Absolutely.
I'll cut it there.
And it doesn't bother me at all that you bring up the mobile vasectomy van, that they're offering free vasectomies and abortion pills to people up there, because it just says who they are. And
most of those guys don't need that.
Yeah, and I think people like Kevin O'Leary, who has the audacity to admit on television that he's shocked and thought that Kamala would go back to the center after even seeing so-called centrist Joe Biden's administration veer hard left on everything, not just economic policy, but everything. They just have their heads in the sand, or it's wishful thinking, or they're not as smart as I think they are. I mean, he's one of the smartest guys in the financial world, I think, in this country at this point, or at least a lot of people think he is. So why do you think they were saying that? Why do you think they were thinking that, really, is what my question is.
How could he be shocked? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. Why was he thinking that she was going to go to the center?
Well, I think what they're looking at this, you know, they used to say about generals, they used to say they're always don't trust the generals because they're fighting the last war. Well, this guy's looking at the last type of political campaign. And we saw in 2020 a new kind of political campaign where you don't need a platform, you don't need a candidate, you just put up a dead husk and you drag him across the finish line, and you go out and you manufacture ballots, and you pull in ballots from voters who don't exist, and you get those ballots in. Well, now they've gone a step further. Now they don't even need voters. They've got a candidate who nobody voted for, and who has no policy, and who has no real backing except in the media. And Kevin O'Leary thinks, oh, they're running a campaign where you have to appeal to the swing voters. They don't care what the swing voters think. They intend to win without the swing voters. They intend to win by pulling in ballots from all the illegal aliens who have been registered to vote, by all of the people who are fraudulently on the voter rolls, and they're signaling to their hard left elements of their party and to the hard left funders who are paying for all of this. Listen, we are going to go farther left than you've ever dreamed of before. We've never had a candidate run on a policy of price fixing and price controls. And that's why Kevin O'Leary is shocked. He's shocked at the audacity that they don't even care what middle of the road voters think anymore. They think they can win this with just the left and all of the allies that they've brought into the country.
Yeah, it's amazing, you know, and the O'Leary types. Here's what I've noticed since she made this price control policy announcement: is that the O'Leary types, they don't like to mention Richard Nixon or Jimmy Carter. They like to talk about the USSR, Venezuela, Cuba, you know, which are all spot on, right on target. Yeah. And that's why I mentioned Nixon and Carter in my opening, because Richard Nixon actually in the early 70s, didn't he try to put price control on every good and service in America?
Yes, he did. He did. And he called it whip inflation now, win. You remember that? Whip inflation now. And it worked. It worked for the 90 days that the price and wage controls were there. No prices went up, no wages went up. And then they said, okay, we've calmed inflation. Now we'll lift the controls, and everything shot up 3 times as fast as it had been shooting up before, because he had completely upended the whole supply demand cycle and the whole production cycle. You think we have a what do we call it? What we've been experiencing is the supply line crisis since the resumption of economic activity after the shutdowns, after the lockdowns.
Right.
You think this is going to be that on steroids, and for the entire 4 years of her term, if we were so unlucky as to see her elected. And it is not about prices. It's just like everything else they do. It's like they're fear-mongering over climate or global warming or whatever they want to call it. They're fear-mongering over the Wuhan virus, the COVID. It's all about intimidation of people and control of the population. If you can control somebody's health care, if you can control their electricity supply, if you can control their access to gasoline, and you control their access to food, you have taken away the necessities of life and deprived people of their liberty, and they can no longer defy the government. They can no longer say what they think. It'll turn out like China, where we get a social credit score. And if we have been sufficiently praising the regime, well, then we can get points so that we can go buy gas, or we can buy groceries in the store where the elites shop. That's what it's going to turn out like. I mean, you know the profit margins of the grocery industry. It's 1%. The guy running the local Albertsons or Piggly Wiggly makes 1%.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So just to bring it home, maybe we can give an anecdote. I came across one that really jumped out to me, and I didn't remember it from when I was a youngster in the 70s, but they have videos that go with it. It's called the Drowning Chicks story. Have you heard of that story? Where the chicken farmers, the chicken farmers. This is
remind
under
me. I
Nixon's
think
yeah.
The
Remind
me.
Saw, the cost of transportation shot through the roof. The cost of feed shot through the roof. So the chicken farmers see that, and they start just pulling out 55-gallon drums by the thousands, filling them up with water, and throwing millions of baby chickens into the drums and drowning them, because it's going to cost them less to do that than it is to get those to raise them, get those chickens to market.
That's right.
You think that the tolerant lefties are going to like that when they end up seeing these little baby chicks getting drowned in 55-gallon drums again? Because that's what's going to happen.
We'll tell them to imagine that they're human babies and that they're abortions, and then they'll be comfortable with it. If they're chicks or kitties or puppies, or baby seals, they wouldn't stand for it. But it's the absolute idiocy, and it's moronic to even talk about this. You're ignoring the entire supply chain, because behind that grocery store, there's a truck, and there are truck drivers that will charge something to make a profit so it's profitable for them to bring it. Behind them, there are grocery warehouses. I used to work in a grocery warehouse. The profit margins are not high. They pay their employees extremely well. They have great working conditions, because they have to go in the cold room. You've got to go in there with a forklift sometimes, and other times you've just got a hand truck, and you've got an order sheet, and you pull your orders and you stick it on the hand truck. Those guys get paid a lot of money. Back in the 80s, I was getting $12 and $14 an hour to do that work, because you couldn't find somebody who would stay cold for 20 minutes at a time. Well, all of those people have to be paid. The farmer has to be paid. Who does she think is gouging the American people? Does she think it's the grocery store owner? Does she think it's a truck driver? Is it the guy who owns the warehouse? Is it the farmer? Is it the aggregator that's bringing from the slaughterhouse? There's nobody gouging anybody except Joe Biden and Kamala Harris driving up prices of everything across the board. The consumer price index has gone up 20%. And how much has the producer price index gone up? Well, lo and behold, exactly 20%. The production prices, the cost to produce things has gone up, and it's because Kamala Harris cast the tie-breaking vote to authorize a $2 trillion spending bill with no real guardrails and no brakes on it. We don't even know where that money's going. That's part of what paid for the, what is it, $107 billion and for charging stations for electric vehicles. And so far they've built 7 stations. Where'd that money go?
Yeah.
Well, it's going to hire people to harvest votes, to harvest ballots from people who don't even know what they're voting for. That's where that money is going, and we're going to be screwed in November. And she's here talking about, she can't even say the word right. She's calling it price gauging. She's talking about price gouging. I mean, the only way we can stop this is if everyone who hears your voice and mine not only votes, but goes out and drags their neighbors to the polls, goes out and says, hey, who's in charge of the Republican Party here? Who's in charge of the RFK Jr. Party here? The Jill Green, the what's the crazy guy, Cornel West, anybody but Kamala Harris. Who's in charge? Everybody has to get involved and say, I want to volunteer with any party except the Democrats, because you have to stop this, and it has to be, the win has to be big. It has to be 5, 7, 8 points of margin so they can't steal it again.
Yeah, it does. So we got to take our first break, Bart. When we come back, though, I want to, we'll hear from O'Leary again, this time about Trump's tariff policy. And I think people will be surprised about what Kevin O'Leary, a pure free market guy, says about this policy. And I just wanted to show it as a juxtaposition of free market capitalist policy versus the communist policy of Kamala Harris. We'll be right back with Bart Marquis on the Rob Maness Show. It's Training Tuesday, and we're talking about Kamala's economic disaster that's pending if she gets elected.
Turn our attention to the Donald Trump side of the coin. One expert warns that Trump's tariffs could spark a trade war and an inflation shock within a year. What do you think to Trump's tariff proposals?
The tariffs have been on for years, Stuart. This is basically a fight with China to get to a level playing field in trade. Personally, I don't like tariffs long term, but I understand them as weaponry. What I would prefer happen in either administration is to actually turn up the dial even harder at a time when the Chinese economy is not in its strongest position, and force them to the table on IP law and reciprocal laws and access to public markets. And the reason I feel this way is not academic research. I'm an investor. I have positions in China. And just so everybody knows why I'm so biased, they have screwed me over the last 12 years. I have no access to their courts. I can't understand why they get to list their companies without the same cost and compliance that I have to pay. It's time to really make them understand no more access to the U.S. market unless we get a reciprocal place. Squeeze Chinese heads is what I'm willing to do. So I like tariff policies, not forever, but to turn the heat up to a blowtorch temperature now. Let's go.
Yeah, understood. Entirely understood. Tariffs as a weapon, a negotiating weapon. Kevin O'Leary, always good. Thanks for joining us, man. See you again soon.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Training Tuesday here on Worldview Tube and our X Spaces simulcast. And my guest is former Department of Energy official Bart Marquis, who's my friend and also a Foreign Service officer and an author. And he understands a lot about energy, the economy, inflation. That's why I wanted to get him to come on and talk about this stuff. And Bart, when I found that clip of O'Leary, I have to say I was a little bit surprised that he was so all in and wants to go even harder and even used the phrase, I want to squeeze Chinese heads. But that's what I've been expecting from American business people and especially investors for a long time because it's a very uneven playing field. But while we're listening to that, I'm remembering that the lefties want to suppress American businesses and crush American heads, squeeze our heads instead of the Chinese, our primary adversary. And I just don't get it because this tariff policy is a good common sense policy in the short term, as O'Leary said, right?
You bet it is. And, you know, this is kind of uncomfortable territory for me because I've spent 45 years as a free trade guy, a free trade, free market guy. And I believed in the 1970s and 1980s and beyond that free trade was the right way to go, that it made for economic growth for everybody. But that's only true if it's truly free trade and if it's being practiced by all the parties around. What we've seen is that America has lifted tariffs and has opened its borders and opened its doors to people who are really our enemies coming in here, and they have hollowed out our manufacturing base. They have hollowed out our industrial base. We changed the balance of a world war in the 1940s by coming in and overwhelming the might of the Russian, the Germans and the Japanese and their allies. And remember, the Russians were on their side for quite a while, but we overwhelmed the Axis powers with the industrial might of American industry. Henry Kaiser said, I can build you a battleship a month. And boy, he did it. But he only did it because he had a manufacturing base. We had steel. We had assembly plants. Everything. We couldn't do that today. We can't manufacture a car here anymore. All we do is assemble them from parts that are manufactured elsewhere, and a lot of that industrial capability has been shipped to China through the collusion of two entities. One is the Chinese government sending spies here to steal industrial secrets. They've come and they've taken blueprints, they've taken plans, they've taken every kind of production know-how and taken it to China. And at the same time, we've had environmental regulations coming in, raising the cost of building manufacturing facilities, raising the cost of building refineries, raising the cost of building electricity generation plants. I don't know, maybe 15 years ago, I worked with an investment group. We were trying to build a refinery in southern Arizona, and it was going to be the cleanest refinery, and it was going to produce clean fuels, and it would have been the very first refinery built in the United States in 30 years, because nobody could get approval from the merry-go-round of environmental regulations that had been imposed by a series of successive administrations, Democrat and Republican alike. Donald Trump came in and blew all that away. The reason we all were prosperous before COVID hit, the reason we all were prosperous was he lifted the regulatory burden, he lifted the curbs on producing energy, and he cut the inflation rate. We had inflation down to 1%. My kids didn't know what inflation was. They sure do now.
That's right. Yeah, my kids didn't know what a mortgage rate above 2.5%, 3% was, but they sure do now, man. I'm telling you. Now O'Leary talked about pressuring the Chinese through about intellectual property and all that stuff, but when I look at this, I also see the national security piece of it, and that we could use this to pressure the Chinese to back off in places like the South China Sea, where you just saw yesterday a Chinese Coast Guard ship hit a Filipino Coast Guard ship in a confrontation over a shoal area that the Filipinos say is part of their territory. So the Chinese are back up to their old shenanigans, trying to claim new territory that's thousands of kilometers from their coastline, and they're using force to do it. So we could use that to pressure them to stop doing that. But how do we? And I fully support the President Trump in this. The rebuilding the manufacturing base. I think with the whole the 2020 election, all of that got interrupted because his regulatory environment produced something like 12,000 new manufacturing facilities inside the United States in a very short period of time. But we've got to rebuild all of it. I mean, we can't even produce enough 155 millimeter artillery shells to keep the Ukrainians supplied, let alone ourselves and the rest of our allies if we ever had to, God forbid, go to a great power war again.
Yeah, and we don't even produce the chemical precursors to make the explosive, the gunpowder, the accelerants inside the shells, and right now there's a Czech company that is trying to buy one of the biggest ammunition manufacturers in America. I hope they don't get to do it. I don't trust them. I don't trust the transaction, but not much I can do about it. But they're trying to buy it, and they're going to control 75% of the primer manufacturing capacity in America, and the Biden administration just let that happen. We're going to hopefully the deal won't get consummated, but these are the makers of all of these are ammunition companies that Federal, CGI, Heavy Shock, Remington. It's the parent company, and it's going to be sold to a foreign manufacturer who will then control the primer industry, have a near monopoly on the primer industry, and a pretty heavy, close to a monopoly on the ammunition industry. Why are we letting a foreign company come in and do that? That doesn't make sense to me. But bringing that manufacturing back, President Trump has said in one of his economic speeches that he's going to say there will be tariffs unless it is produced in America. And produced in America means made in America, not assembled in America from parts made in Brazil or Mexico or in maquiladores, the little factories that the Chinese build on the Mexican border to take advantage of NAFTA, just on the Mexican side of the southern border to take advantage of NAFTA. He said it was a terrible deal, and it's been completely upended. We have to make American manufacturing competitive again. We're in the position, we're like a third world country where a big mercantilist power is coming in and making us, taking things from us and then forcing us to buy the cheap stuff that they make. You can't buy a decent, you ever tried to buy a splitting maul or a sledgehammer recently, Rob, or a wedge? If you split your own wood, you can't get American steel. Everything is made from Chinese steel. You go to Harbor Freight, it's Chinese steel. You go to Home Depot, it's Chinese steel. You have to pay $100, $75, $80 to buy a splitting wedge made from American steel, so it will actually split the wood that you're going after. I mean, these are things that affect normal American lives, and
Yep.
we can't even get American steel anymore.
And after this break, I want to continue that conversation because President Trump's got some ideas that he's talked about on the stump so far about the steel industry. He's been doing a lot of talking and traveling in Pennsylvania, and will continue to do so because it's such a key swing state. So it's Training Tuesday. We're talking about Kamala's disastrous economic policies and President Trump's policies that have actually been proven to work and will continue to work. And we'll hear from a grocery store chain owner when we come back after this break on the Rob Maness Show.
Hello, I'm Brandon House, and I want to tell you about Numi. This is a swish. You just take 2 capfuls, swish it around your mouth for 3 to 4 minutes, and you're absorbing, according to the studies, glutathione. Now, you don't need to take my word for it. There are over 162,000 studies on PubMed on the power of glutathione. It is a powerful molecule that studies show detoxes our cells. Some studies even show that, well, glutathione might remove mercury from our brains, help to prevent things like Alzheimer's, dementia, and Parkinson's. Now, look, I'm not making claims. I'm just telling you what the research is showing about the powerful molecule glutathione. Numi is the product that contains glutathione. Melissa and I swish with this twice a day. We urge you to go to Numi.com/house1. That's Numi, Neumi.com/HOWSE and the numeral 1. Begin finding out about the power of glutathione while also supporting this broadcast network. Thank you.
Now, Stu Leonard joins me. He's the CEO of a popular grocery store chain. All right, Stu, welcome to the program. What will price controls do to you and the grocery business?
Well, you know, Stuart, first of all, great to see you here. And I'll tell you that Kevin O'Leary's passionate about his topics there. But, you know, we're in our family food store here. We're in the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut market. You know, we have 250,000 people coming through every week. And we're dealing with about 75 local farms now and family businesses around this area. I don't know anybody price gouging. I haven't heard of it. Look, if banana prices go up because of some weather situation or tomato prices go up, I can understand the retailers like the lady you just had on earlier. We have to raise our price of those items because of market conditions. So I have no idea how the government can regulate this.
Who do you blame for the price increases, which gave us a 9% inflation rate earlier in this administration? Who gets the blame for that?
Well, you know, Stuart, I think it's a multiple thing here. Look, anything that requires hands to make our fresh guacamole or to make fresh mozzarella balls here at the store, roast our coffee, labor went up, okay? So our average labor rate has gone up $5 an hour over the last 3 years now. So we can't unreel that and say to our people, you know, we have 3,000 people at Stu Leonard's now. We can't tell them you're going to earn less next year now. So that's baked in. I think you look at energy costs that have gone up right now, you know, and you look at feed prices. For corn, you know, it used to be, you know, I've been in the business now 50 years with our family. And I've always seen corn prices for a bushel bag was around, you know, $2, $3 a bag. And now it's like $4 and $5 a bag. So, you know, chickens eat a lot of corn, you know, so that'll drive your egg prices and so forth up, you know.
Stu, I just want to remind you, and our viewers that 52 years ago, yours was the first supermarket in America that I ever went to, and I was blown away. I never left. Stu Leonard, you're all right. Yeah. Thanks for joining us this morning. We're always...
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show here on Worldview Tube and our X Spaces simulcast. And it's Training Tuesday. We're talking about Communist Kamala's economic plans to destroy capitalism in the United States of America. That's right. I said it. That's what's going to happen. These things have all been tried before. They've killed people. These policies have in other countries, and they've destroyed economies. When I was a teenager, the American economy was destroyed by two different presidents from different parties that tried this stupidity. Price controls. And my guest today is Bart Marquis, a friend of mine who's a former deputy assistant secretary of energy for international affairs, and I think a Bush administration, right, Bart? So you and I, we've come a long way from free market capitalists. That at one point in my political thinking, in my economic thinking, 10 years ago, I probably would have pushed back fairly hard on tariffs and things like that, and I would obviously would never have thought about price controls because I've learned the lessons of the Carter and Nixon administrations and all of the communist countries that we've defeated over the years. But we've had to come a long way to get our heads wrapped around this concept and everything. And Mr. Leonard there, he points out a lot of things. And what caught my attention was the $5 an hour increase over time for employees. And you said you were making what, $12 to $13 an hour in the grocery store area, in the refrigerator back in the 80s.
Yeah, back in the 80s.
He must have paid astronomical prices for labor.
Well, he's paying that for the warehouse guys. He's paying that for the guys who go in the cold box. You bet he is. He's paying twice that now. He's probably paying $30, $35 an hour for those guys. For the people, working out in the store that you see trimming the produce and stocking the shelves, I think those guys are making $20 an hour. But a few years ago, the $20 an hour guys were making 12, and they were pretty happy to get 12. That was a good wage. But what's happening, the reason they call it inflation is they're blowing up the currency, filling it full of air. There's no value in the currency. And there are several reasons for that. One is that they are just printing money to meet these. They passed $2.5 trillion worth of spending in the first 2 years of the Biden administration. I mentioned before, Kamala Harris was the tie-breaking vote on the biggest spending bill in American history in the Senate. She's the one who made it pass, and now she's running as a candidate who's going to whip inflation and cut spending. And she keeps stealing President Trump's platform points. Pretty soon, she's just going to phone it in and say, "That's it, I quit. I endorse Trump. He's got all the good ideas. I'm tired of stealing him now." But
you wish.
Yeah, so do I. But the other reason that our currency, that we're facing inflation, our currency is losing value. That's what's really happening. And a tariff is something that a weak country has to put in place to protect itself from a strong country. Obama and Biden and their ilk have made us weak. They have made our economy weak. There's another component to the value of the dollar, and that is that I think a lot of people haven't noticed. That is petrodollars. The petroleum industry is no longer denominated exclusively in U.S. dollars. That's a departure from 70 years of policy. For 70 years, every petroleum purchase anywhere in the world has been denominated in U.S. dollars. And what that has meant is that several trillion U.S. dollars have been in circulation outside the United States. So when we print $1 trillion in new currency, it's not as noticeable as when Argentina printed $1 trillion, whatever they called it, back in the 1970s, or the Weimar Republic printed $1 trillion Deutschmarks back in the 1920s, back when people were taking cash in wheelbarrows and it would cost, a box full of cash to buy a loaf of bread. That's what we have not faced that. We've gotten away with printing dollars to pay off the deficit because there are trillions of dollars out there in circulation, and we've been watering the whiskey all along. And now suddenly all those barrels of whiskey that have been out there, all those dollars that have been out there, people are starting to say, yeah, I'll pay for this in Chinese yuan. I'll pay for this in euros. And they don't need the dollars, and the dollars are being repatriated to America. And we have more dollars than we have goods to buy. And so everything is going up. And it's going to continue, and it's going to get worse. And if we have price controls, you're going to have people waiting in line. You talked about waiting in line for gas. In California, the governor said that not only were we going to wait in line for gas, he said we can only buy gas on alternate days. If our license plate ended in an even number, we could buy on an even number day. And if it was an odd number, we could buy on an odd number day. And I remember sitting there as a teenager with my mother in our Volkswagen in a line for gas. We turned it off and we would get out. She'd be on one side, I'd be on the other, and we'd push the car when our turn came to advance in the line, and so would everybody else, because you didn't want to waste a few drops of gas because there was a shortage, because there was a price control. As soon as the price controls were lifted, the shortages went away. Gas became more expensive, but the supply rose to meet the demand. Now, imagine if that were eggs or milk or formula for your baby. What are you going to feed your baby when it's not a matter of just standing in line? It's a matter of, I can't get it. And then
people our age, we remember seeing the pictures of the empty shelves in the Soviet supermarkets, and people standing in line for it. But I think the COVID pandemic's the closest these generations have really come to that. Well, we've got a couple of questions in our live audience. Let's go ahead and take one of those before we go to our last break. Our host over there is Shell. Shell, go ahead. Who's first?
We have Bishop from the Punch Bowl Town Square, sir. Bishop?
Are you calling on me? I can't hear you.
Yes.
I can only imagine. Question on this price gouging. What would be the place that Kamala Harris would ideally attack? What and what's the cause and effect? What's going to happen?
Bishop, you rubber banded a little bit at the beginning there. Can you ask that question again?
The question is, with Kamala Harris wanting to handle the price gouging, where's the first place she's going to attack on the price gouging?
Okay. Where's the first place she's going to attack on the price gouging, and then what are the downstream areas? I guess.
Yeah, she'll attack where the consumer meets the product. She'll attack in the grocery store, which is. It makes no sense. Like we said before, they have a 1%, maybe 2% profit margin. There's no deep profit margin in a grocery store. And she'll say, well, Albertsons can only charge up to, $1 a pound, 23 cents a banana. You can't charge any more than 23 cents a banana. And if the cost of getting a banana to Albertsons is 24 cents, nobody's going to take it because they're going to lose money. Nobody ever made money. You can't make money on volume if your profit margin is non-existent. The only place I've seen it is on that show, The Office, the Michael Scott Paper Company. He kept it going for, if you ever watch The Office, he kept it going for long enough to get bought out by his old company. But you can't do it. If she says the acceptable cost for a 6-pack of root beer is $6.50, and the cost of producing root beer goes up to $8, you're not going to get any root beer. Well, what if it's not root beer? What if it's eggs? What if it's beef? What if it's pork? And if you see that a store has a truck pulled up in front of it, you will run and you will fight and you'll jab people to get in line and to fight to get to the head of the line. You don't even know what's going to be on that truck. You just know it's delivering something and you want it. All I can say is stock up on cigarettes and alcohol, because people will trade their lives away for those. and we're going to go to a barter economy soon.
Yeah, we saw that a little bit with baby milk formula and toilet
Yeah.
paper during the pandemic, but it wasn't caused by severe inflation. It was caused by more of a restricted supply chain. Well, we've got to take our last break. When we come back, we'll look at Kamala's plan a little bit wider out aperture than just the price controls. And I want to get Bart's take on that. And we got one more question we'll take from the audience. Hopefully, we'll get to that before we close out the show here on Training Tuesday on the Rob Maness Show at Worldview 2.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. Melissa and I have been taking Bella Grace, this powerful elixir, since last fall, 2023. The results have been amazing. My hands would crack and bleed, deep cuts and cracks every winter for years. No matter what we did, we couldn't get them to stop cracking and bleeding. This year, I took Bella Grace, no cracking, no bleeding. My acid reflux, gone. Haven't had to take a Pepsid. My hair growth, the last 2 times I had my hair cut, the lady had to use thinning shears on my hair. That's amazing. We've also received incredible feedback from you, our listening audience, and the impact it's had for you. This is loaded with astaxanthin. That's a powerful antioxidant. Collagen, but top grade collagen. Studies show 95% of it is being absorbed in the body because of the way they develop it. Then we have something called cat's claw. That's an anti-inflammatory from a vine in Peru. It's the bark, and it's an anti-inflammatory. There are about 80 clinical trials on Bella Grace. Please get a subscription now and save. MelissaHouseBG.com.
This morning, both Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump barnstorming the key battleground state of Pennsylvania. Harris and her new running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, beginning a bus tour in Pittsburgh tomorrow.
Hello, family and friends.
Fresh off the vice president laying out her economic plan in the first major policy speech of her just weeks-old campaign.
Compare my plan with what Donald Trump intends to do. He plans to give billionaires massive tax cuts year after year. You know, I think that if you want to know who someone cares about, look who they fight for.
Harris's ambitious agenda, much of which would have to be cleared by Congress, calling for a federal ban on price gouging of groceries, up to $25,000 in down payment assistance for first-time homebuyers, a tax credit of up to $6,000 for families with a newborn, and capping the cost of insulin at $35 and other out-of-pocket prescription drug expenses at $2,000.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Training Tuesday on Worldview Tube and X-Spaces simulcast, and my guest today is former Department of Energy official Bart Marquis, and we're talking about these communist plans that Kamala Harris and her team have in store for the United States of America. And Bart, I just wanted to give folks a feel for the larger plan, though what little we know about it. We don't really know a whole lot, but I got to be honest with you. I own my own home, and if somebody puts a $25,000 subsidy out there, the price of my house just increased by $25,000, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's asinine. And you know, I've already paid off the student loans for these schlubs. Why am I buying them a house now? I'd like to, my 2 eldest kids have bought their houses. They're making payments. They have a mortgage. My 2 youngest can't even begin to think about that. At 9% interest, 7% mortgage, 8% mortgage, not possible, not going to happen. And $35 cap on insulin, boy, that sounds great, doesn't it? If you're a diabetic and you need your insulin and you're tired of paying high rates for it, but if you're a diabetic and you need your insulin, you better get a friend who knows some doctors and pharmacists in Mexico or Colombia or India or Canada or Europe, because you're not going to get any insulin in America, not when there's a price cap of $35 on it. It will be carefully, rationed, and believe me, you're not going to get it when you need it. You cannot change the laws, the basic laws of economics of supply and demand. You can't do it.
Every time governments try to interfere with it, it ends up being one kind of disaster over another. Well, we've got one more question in the audience. We'll go ahead and take that. Shell, go ahead.
We have Jeff, sir.
Good afternoon, Colonel. Good afternoon, Bart. I really appreciate you guys coming up. My question is, considering Sean Ryan I've heard him say for the last couple of months, we're giving $80 million a week to the Taliban in Kabul, who just embarrassed us with our own equipment with their parade in Kabul. How can the government, especially the Democrats, look themselves in the mirror, knowing that they're giving the enemy of the United States $80 million cash plus much more, and not take care of our homeless Americans and our veterans, sir?
That's a great question. I think that kind of gets to the audacity of tripling down on these crazy policies, and they just don't give a damn what we think, do they, Bart?
They don't. And, it's another example where in Israel, we're funding both sides of a war. We're sending how many millions of dollars a week to the terrorists of Hamas. And you can say, oh, this is for humanitarian aid. But, the minute it crosses over into their territory, it becomes the property of Hamas. And they decide who gets it and who doesn't get it. And all we're doing is feeding their soldiers and their arm. I can't really call them soldiers. They're not soldiers. They're terrorists. They're gunmen. But they're the ones that are taking all this aid. Giving money to the Taliban it's disgusting. What we give to them in 1 week would take care of homes for our veterans in several states. And there we are giving it to them while they're stoning women and girls for invented offenses because they dared aspire to liberty of some sort. It's just asinine, and it's evil. It's beyond asinine. It's evil. And I join you, Jeff. I don't know how they can look themselves in the mirror. I don't know how they can do it. They're not on our side. They are not on the side of America. They're not on the side of truth or justice.
Yeah, and I think when you look at the big picture of what little we know about this economic plan, Bart, describe for folks what the end state will be with just these facts that we know about. $25,000 increase in housing prices, grocery prices go through the roof, and scarcity is involved now. And with energy, we already have crushed our energy industry, which Donald Trump says will bring back and bring inflation down, which is true. But
it is true.
If Kamala says, what will this look like?
It is true. And thank you for mentioning energy. I forgot to mention that as one of the elements of inflation is the high energy prices. And before I go to energy, I just want to say the net impact of the $25,000 down payment subsidy for housing will be zero in terms of housing made available. It will simply mean there will be $25,000 more in the pockets of young spendthrift people who will probably spend it on recreational drugs at some point. They're not going to spend it on houses, or money is fungible. All it means is they're going to have $25,000 to piss away. Forgive my coarseness of language. But with energy, if we are producing American energy, we were not just a net energy exporter, which people told me was not possible. Trump made the United States a net energy exporter. We had so much that we could sell it to other people. We could produce all the energy we needed, and we could sell it to other people. We were not just energy self-sufficient, we were energy dominant. Saudi Arabia did what we wanted because we could outproduce Saudi Arabia. We could dominate the market. Other countries did what we wanted because we could dominate. Remember, gas was $2 a gallon. I want to sell hats that say "Make gas $2 again." That should be the slogan. Make gasoline $2 again, because you do that, the price of everything goes down, because energy is at the base and the foundation and the core of the pricing of absolutely everything we make, everything we sell. It's not just transportation, it's production as well.
Oh, you're absolutely right. Well, before I let you go, I have to ask you about something that President Trump just mentioned on the stuff yesterday, and it's because I advocated for this when I was even a wing commander. We had plans that we were drawing up to put small modular reactors on Kirtland Air Force Base so that we could create our own electricity and even push power out in peacetime to the community. And the president has said, I am going to support the development and building of small modular reactors around the United States. What are your thoughts on that? And that's going to help us become energy dominant again, won't it?
Hallelujah. I didn't hear him say that. I'm so glad he said that. I've been advocating for nuclear energy for decades. It is, and this is a real bright spot in American politics, because the left is finally coming in and saying, you know what, we could go along with nuclear power now. It is clean. There's no emission. If you want to get clean power, in the 1950s, when they were first making nuclear power reactors, you know what the slogan was? It will be too cheap to meter. Too cheap to meter. We're not going to bother even charging for it. It's going to be so cheap. And that would be true if all we were looking at were the production costs. The thing that makes nuclear power expensive are the regulatory burdens imposed layer after layer after layer after layer after layer to make sure that it's safe. Well, the small modular reactors are inherently safe. They are made in a way that they cannot melt down. They cannot have a nuclear accident. It's brilliant. It would spark a whole new energy boom. It would enable people who want to do crypto mining, people who want to do artificial intelligence, people want to do have electric vehicles. Nobody understands how much electricity AI takes. It dwarfs the requirements of crypto mining. It's enormous, and we're going to this thing. We have to have more electricity. Only something like a massive investment in new SMRs will be able to meet the demand.
Well, I'm glad I asked the question. It wasn't on my list, but I just remembered it as we were talking there.
Me too.
So there's a bright spot. There's a bright spot out there. And folks, it's called voting for the next Trump administration to come in, and we can address all these. Bart Marquis, thank you very much, sir. I appreciate your time. We'll have to get you back soon before the election to talk some more about. I want to go into a whole show on energy dominance and the fastest way we get back there and how we can sustain it. I think that's a critically important piece of information the American people need.
I'd love that.
Thank you again very much.
Thanks, Rob.
And tell folks where they can find you.
On Twitter, at bmarcois, at BMARCOIS, and on my website at aminutewithbart.com. aminutewithbart.com. Think of it as your daily newspaper. It has 60 or 70 stories. I update it several times throughout the day. aminutewithbart.com.
All right, thanks. It's on my list. I followed it this morning. So minutewithbart.com. Bart Marquis, folks, a great American, just a highly informative guy. We'll get him back again. Tomorrow's Whistleblower Wednesday. We're talking about President Trump's plan to take on Big Pharma with John Richardson, who's been on the show before. I'll see you then on Worldview Tube and our X Spaces simulcast.